Off, we've got public comment period real quick. If anybody wants to speak to the board, sure. Let's start with you. And for anybody here that isn't aware, public comment session, we get 2 minutes, and if you just state your name and the township where you're from for the record, that would be awesome.
Okay. My name is Drew Ferguson. I'm a resident of Money Creek Township. The statements on the sheet that I've given you are taken directly from the Houston County Zoning Ordinance, and I hope that you'll have a chance to read them carefully later. They bring up the following questions, which I respectfully ask you. 1, to what extent are the 9 priorities of the Houston County Zoning Ordinance being taken into account in terms of frac sand mining? 2, to what extent are these 9 priorities being taken into account by planning and zoning? 3, when and where will there be a transparent communication to the public about the current status of the frac sand mining issue? 4, it's very clear on the second side of the sheet, the side that says continued, that planning and zoning is in violation of the crystal clear language of its own ordinances. 5, if planning and zoning cannot manage to enforce its own ordinances now, how will it manage to do so if frac sand mining is allowed? 6, why are there ordinances at all if they're not being enforced? This undermines public faith in our public officials and opens the county to liability. We count on you. Who can we turn to? 7, it is the county zoning administrator's job to enforce the ordinances, yet he does not do so. Therefore, he is not doing his job. 8, since he is not successfully discharging the duties of his office, he may and ought to be considered for termination by the county board, which, per the ordinances, has the power to terminate him. 9, per best practice, there should be term limits for this position. Fresh faces and regulated turnover are needed to ensure that people are not getting too cozy and turning a blind eye to their actual jobs. Thank you.
Here.
All right, and we got somebody else. Mike, you wanted to come up quick?
Thank you. Mike Fields, Winnebago Township. It's not very surprising that Bonanza Grain violated its conditional use permit. It would be more surprising if it didn't. I mean, if you knew that speeding laws weren't enforced, wouldn't you be tempted to press the pedal to the metal once in a while? Over the years, the county attorney, environmental services, the planning commission, and the board of adjustment have demonstrated a selective and often dismissive attitude toward the Houston County zoning ordinance. Why they have done so is open to conjecture, but as a result, mines and feedlots have come to expect little to no consequence for violating the provisions of the ordinance. You are not in an enviable position. The Board of Commissioners has been maneuvered into a situation where it can either enforce the law, resulting in some economic hardship, or you can rubber stamp lawlessness and violate your oath of office. If you use your imaginations, I'm sure you can come up with an alternative that adheres to the zoning ordinance, punishes violators, and avoids widespread economic turmoil. Actually, the situation that you're going to consider today is just another reason to totally ban frac sand mining. Environmental Services is either unable or unwilling to enforce existing regulations. Why waste another minute drafting frac sand regulations that won't be enforced? And as an aside, you may have heard that the Defense Department recently came out with a report that calls global warming one of the gravest security threats facing the nation. So not only is a total ban of frac sand mining the conservative thing to do, because it maintains the status quo, it would be the patriotic thing to do. Thank you for your time.
All right, there was another person out there that wanted to speak, correct? Anybody else, ma'am?
My name is Gretchen Cook. I'm from the city of La Crescent. I'm here to ask you, as a water drinker, to please guard our water. That is part of your jobs also. And another comment is, this is my first time at a county board meeting. It'd be real nice if we had some signs in the building that tell us where this meeting is held. The only sign I found says it's in the basement. So if you are water drinkers or are tourists, you enjoy this area, please do your jobs and enforce the laws. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, we've got, let's see. Yep, we've got a few minutes, so.
Yeah. My name is Elizabeth Onis, and I'm from Houston Township. Our ordinances exist to protect public health and safety. Everyone in this room is a taxpayer, and because the commissioners and the zoning department and the county attorneys are all funded by our taxes, it's their job to uphold the ordinances that are in place to protect all of us. To continue on the metaphor about speed limits, if someone is driving 60 miles an hour past an elementary school, we don't say, oh gee, it's okay, let's just raise the speed limit there so that you won't get a ticket because it's complicated. We say, no, you've got to adhere to the speed limit here so that a 5-year-old kid doesn't get run over. So I think it's important for us to mind the ordinances that are in place, and if those are not going to be enforced in a method that is fair, then the people in those positions should be terminated or discontinued from what they're doing so that we can.
All right, Kelly?
Good morning, Commissioners. I wasn't able to attend the last Planning Commission meeting, but based on the reports from the press and comments I heard from people who were there, this is what I take away from those things. Number one, the Planning Commission, Zoning Administration, Environmental Services Department have developed a practice of not enforcing ordinances. This practice of not enforcing ordinances is at the recommendation even of the county attorney. And they also appear to have no plans to enforce the ordinance in the future. If that is the case, you as commissioners, I would imagine, are thinking, how did we get here? How did it come to the point where we don't enforce our ordinances? And I would say you need to take a very close look first at the Planning Commission. The chair of that commission has been on the Planning Commission for 39 years. When I tell that to people in other counties, they laugh. They laugh. I think it's really important that you folks get a handle on how we've been operating, evaluate what is the right way to operate, and begin to put in place some changes that will enhance or at least reclaim some of the lost trust the public has in the governance of this county.
Hear, hear.
Sir?
Yeah, I'm from the city of Caledonia. Have a construction company for
State your name and township, please.
Alan Dean Meyer. A construction company for the past 35, 40 years. We use a lot of sand, a lot of rock, a lot of everything in our area. The farmers in our area use the dairy farmers use a tremendous amount of sand. The zoning planning commission made a recommendation to hold this for 6 months. I think if they wouldn't have done that, you might have had 100, 200, 300 people here. Farmers, everybody else. to show up for this meeting. They're thinking that you're going to go along with their recommendation. I'd hate to see you not go along with their recommendation for the 6-month period. It's going to give the farmers, the construction people, the time to get through the summer at least, knowing what we have. It's just the right thing to do. Thank you.
All right, we have 2 minutes, so one more person.
Bruce Chemical from Caledonia. Though it might be the right thing to do, this recommendation talks about a 6-month CUP, but actually it's 12 months because the way the CUP is crafted, it said that unless there's been some changes since the meeting last Thursday, they would allow another single blast to occur within the 6-month CUP, and regardless of what the answer, regardless of what would happen with determining if there had been injury or harm done from the August 4th blast, would be retroactive from the future blast, the commission would grant the construction company to spend another 6 months to remove the material that they blasted. So it's not a 6-month CUP, it's a 12-month CUP.
All right, it is 9:15, so we're going to go on with the rest of the agenda.
Be a new application to expand a mine, conditional use permit. I think before I start on that, I'd like to address maybe some of the comments that were talked about earlier today. First of all, when you're talking about a mine, you have to refer to the mining ordinance, which is section 26. And if there are violations to that ordinance, you have to refer to that part of the ordinance when talking about alleged violations. Any violations that come up are required to go through a process, that being a public hearing, and the county board has an option to go through a public hearing to look at those potential violations, if there is one. Now, I don't know of any violations out there today, and I assume the county board or planning commission doesn't either. And if they did, they sure could hold a public hearing. The reason the planning commission held a public hearing was to address the new application to expand the mine. So part of what I'm talking about here is due process. When you deprive someone of their due process, that's not a good road to go down. And so Bonanza Grain has a right to due process if there is a violation, and that's specific in that mining ordinance. And so those are things you need to address if, like I said, if there is a violation, and this could be for any miner quarry, that process is required. That's part of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So reasons for due process: it gives the applicant or the aggrieved person a right to sufficient notice, right to an impartial arbiter, a right to give testimony, and a right to admit relevant evidence at any hearings. So to go ahead and say it's easy for a zoning office or environmental service office to revoke a permit, just send a letter and yank the permit, well, it's not quite that easy. You have a job here to allow a person to go through the due process that is required under the Constitution. Now, to get into the application, we heard testimony that night. We also had a site visit on June 18th to look at the quarry, to look at neighboring houses, and any issues that came up. Planning Commission took some time to walk through the house of Nancy and Brent Schrader's to look at cracks and things along sheetrock seams. They also looked at a complete application that included an operation plan, reclamation plan. They saw the past blasting records from the last 5 years that showed that Kruko's and Bennett Explosives, who does the blasting out there, did not exceed federal limits at all. Didn't even come close to exceeding federal limits as far as the blasting goes. They took all that information, they brought it to a public hearing on June 20th and took additional testimony from the general public. And from that, they came up with a set of conditions. I think I sent you those conditions in your packet, but just to touch on them, when they went through the 15 criteria, there was 2 that stuck out. I believe it was number 10 and number 12. And to address those 2 conditions, they came up with 5 additional conditions. And those being, I'll just read them off. Number 1, that all federal, state, and local permits be obtained and followed. 2, a 6-month time limit with a review permit within 6 months. And so the Planning Commission recommends that this permit, if granted, is only good for 6 months. And at that time, it would be reviewed if Kruko's would plan to extend that with a new permit again. Number 3, that the seismograph readings will be done at 4 locations instead of 2 as in the past. They would like to see seismograph put up both south and west of the mine near the Schrader homes and take readings after this next blast. Number 4 condition was to notify all residences within a half mile before this next blast takes place. And number 5, that this next blast would, as close as possible, replicate the April 4th, 2013 blast that took place and prompted a complaint. So some of the things that they would try and do on this next blast would be to duplicate the number of holes, the depth of those holes, the amount of explosive, things like that, to try and replicate as close as possible that April 4th blast. Now, with that in mind, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the application with those attached conditions. And so, I don't know if you want to look at a motion on the Steele and Schulte permits separate, or do them all together. So it's kind of,
yeah, we can do those first 2, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions here about the last one. So if you want to make a motion to approve Schulte and Steele for their conditional use.
I'll make the motion that we approve the permits.
Which one?
Mark Schulte, Randy Steele.
Okay. Motion moved by Judy.
Second.
Second, Steve. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Bob, real quick, back to the last one. Was it? I'm trying to remember. I know when this first came up, there was an issue with they had gone. The reason this permit came up, they had gone outside of what they were permitted originally. Correct? What was the? They went out how much?
I don't know. It just looks by aerial photos that we have at the office here that they've gone past the original described area from that 2001 permit. No, I don't know how far. You really would have to do a survey to find out just how far. I don't think the county really wants to spend money on a survey to find this out, especially when the applicant decides to come into compliance by applying for a new permit to expand. So, you know, if you really wanted to pursue it, I think a survey would be the next step.
When we come in for a permit, though, is it typically not surveyed, or how do you know where the boundaries are? You know, when an applicant comes in, you know, for whether it be a mine or a borrow pit or building a house, I mean, to say, yep, we're going to have this area being mined. I mean, isn't that surveyed to know those boundaries, or how does that work?
Not necessarily. No, a lot of times it's just described as easy as possible to the 20-acre line, or the 10 or the 2.5-acre square, you know, that's closest to where that perimeter would be that you'd want to describe. The planning commission or county board can certainly make that a condition for future reference to go ahead and survey that line. I think it's been done. You know, it's certainly not unreasonable.
But it's not marked in any way, though.
No, we're just we're using aerial photography, and it gives us a close idea. Is what it is.
So how does it work? Just obviously with the frac sand stuff coming up, we're trying to get our bearings too, so that we don't have bigger issues down the road. How does it work then if somebody comes in for, say, a permit and they want to mine an area? Technically, if we don't have any boundaries set, I mean, they could blow past it by a mile, and it really doesn't mean anything, then, right? I mean, how do you regulate it?
We have a description.
The thing is, right now, on an application, if they were to come in, and what's being done now is actually surveys are being done. That's being called for. So any new, that survey would be accompanying an application.
For all new permits?
Yes.
New conditional?
Yes.
Can you clarify that? What gets a survey now? Or is it for conditional use permits now have to have a land survey?
Part of the application does require it,
Okay.
yes.
Well, in the proposed ordinance.
Proposed ordinance.
Proposed fraction.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The
That's
frac,
okay.
yes.
It's not in the existing.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I was trying to get my bearings on this. So like, for instance, because this happened before with Skyline Materials, when you've got a 50-foot setback and they encroach on it, I mean, is there any repercussions for going past where they said they were going to go?
Well, what Skyline did is they applied for a variance to encroach on that 50-foot, and the Board of Adjustment approved that a couple years ago. So that was one way to remedy it. In that case, the property line in question was the assumed line. Both property owners agreed on that. I don't know that it was surveyed. We measured from that property line to where the mining had taken place and found that it was 25 feet too close. And what the Board of Adjustment did at that time, made it a condition as part of the variance to go ahead and reclaim that part, slope it back, seed it, and make that a part of that, allowing that variance. And so that has happened. You know.
So how the ordinances are written right now, it's more a matter of we screwed up, we'll just get a permit to say we're okay. I mean, there's no repercussions for.
Well, it goes back to due process. When somebody applies when somebody files an application, the county has, they have to act on it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You can't just say, nope, we're not going to take this application, because you're depriving someone of their due process. That's a big deal. I mean, people can sit and laugh about it, but it's not. It's a big deal. If you came in with an application and I said I wasn't going to take it, you'd be a little miffed about it. Okay? Now, I take that seriously.
So in this instance, if they went outside the prescribed boundaries, do you feel it would be appropriate to have due process to figure out if they were in violation of what they said they were going to do?
Today, they are not mining outside of their prescribed area. They're mining inside of it.
I thought you just said that they, according to aerial photographies, it looked like they went outside of it.
Yeah, but today, they are not mining outside of it. They're within the prescribed area.
I'm sorry, you're kind of contradicting yourself. You said they already mined outside of the prescribed area, but today they're not? When did they
When they realized they were outside of their boundary, they moved back in, all right?
Okay, so they reclaimed that spot and moved in, or how did it?
No, they haven't reclaimed it. They have filed for a new application to expand it.
I apologize, Bob. You're losing me. So they were doing work outside of their prescribed area, right?
I think they were. It wasn't surveyed. You know, we might, I can tell you right now, our aerial photography is not exact. The only way to make that a definite is to have it surveyed. All right? Okay. Now, the county board can go ahead and require that. They could go ahead and have a public hearing to address those issues. That's up to the county board. And it's specific in the ordinance. You guys have that option to do that. Now, if you want to go down that road, I can assist you with that. But that's not up to me. That's up to the county board. I don't have the power to go ahead and yank that permit. Right?
Oh, yeah, no. We know that. Okay.
I can see there was a certain area within this pit that extended beyond what's believed to be the boundary, and they were just not right, and they just went to a different area
right.
That is technically, visibly, they believe, within the boundary.
Yeah. They took some overburden off within the described area, within their permitted area, and they started working in that part of the mine. So.
How long were they out of bounds? How long were they out of bounds? Any idea?
Our photo was from 2010, so it looks like they're close at that time.
So they took just overburden.
Yeah.
They didn't extract?
I don't know. It's so close, it's hard to tell, so.
And I guess I've read the section 26 mineral extraction, and I concur with you on that.
Looks like it's pretty detailed as far as the stipulations and the regulations here. 6 months when they have to do 4 seismographic. And this is the findings from the planning commission board?
Yep.
Bob, with that, how does that work when you got, like you were talking earlier, you mentioned, number 10 and number 12. Number 10, will the condition of use be injurious to the use and enjoyment of property in the immediate vicinity of the purpose already permitted? The planning commission said no, but yet we've got landowners that say it is. Who's determining whether it's injurious or not?
Planning commission
it kind of
said
was,
no, and they based it on the conditions. They also based it on blasting records that prove that they haven't gone beyond federal limits with their blasting. So you can base it on opinion, or you can base it on science, and they choose to base it on science.
How does that work? Like something like that. We've got where if you've got the sheriff's department can get called out because of a stereo being too loud. Well, who determines too loud? If a neighbor thinks it's too loud and it's too loud, it's too loud. If a neighbor says, "Hey, this is really a nuisance to us as a neighbor," it's kind of the same thing. If you've got complaints coming in to say that it's not, when you've got complaints coming, how does that, for the board to decide, well, it's not, even though neighbors are complaining about it? How does that work?
Well, that's typically up to a judge or jury on the noise complaints that deem a nuisance. This is up to a planning commission and county board to address the issue with conditions and base it on science as much as possible. To take the human element or emotional element out of it. So this conditions that or the set of criteria that they had to follow, they're required to do that on every application. And so the question comes up on one or more of them as a way to mitigate the problem. They attach conditions to it as they have here today.
Bonanza Grain's actually, I guess, stayed within federal guidelines, possibly even exceeded federal guidelines in their blasting. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. They have not exceeded the federal limit.
Right, they haven't exceeded the federal limit, right. But I think they've gone beyond the recommendations of what the federal guidelines have to the good side, in other words.
Where were the seismographs placed?
All of them were placed between 900 and 1,500 feet away at neighboring houses, one to the north and then two to the east, Sheehan House and Supper Club nearby. So, they're all placed in different locations. And they all, of course, have different readings because there's an infinite amount of readings you can get off a blast depending on where you put it, a distance away, and proximity.
So there was one in each house in that area?
There was two set up for each blast, yeah.
At everybody's house?
Yeah, a Sheeburn house to the north and a Sheehan or the Supper Club to the east.
But not Traeger's?
No.
And then is there a, on top of the hill there, like on the backside, is there a one on there anywhere, on the backside of the mine, or are they all kind of to the open face?
No, they haven't put one there.
So with 4 of them, they'll set them up at the Schrader house
Mm-hmm.
in the future.
Yep.
So then they could have proof.
Yeah. They put them at much closer houses than the Schrader houses.
How many feet are they asking for extension? How far are they going?
400 to 500 to the west and south.
How close is that putting to the nearest house?
The closest it could come would be up to 1,000 feet from the Brent Schrader house, which is the setback set forth in the ordinance. 1,000 foot setback. Yeah.
And we know that 1,000's adequate?
I think it's just an arbitrary number, just to be honest. You know, it was put in the ordinance years ago. Yeah, I think it's a number that a lot of counties use. It's pretty typical.
Not a federal guideline or anything along that?
No.
Okay. Is there such a thing?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think so. In fact, there's blasting that takes place within a couple hundred feet of residential subdivisions. Yeah. You know, you get up by Rochester.
They're demolishing buildings right next to other buildings.
Yeah. You know, it's when you're looking at seismograph readings, it's an exact science. I mean, you get right down to it. They'll do, if they're doing street work in like downtown Spring Grove, busting up pavement, they can set up seismographs at businesses right along the sidewalk and just make sure they're not exceeding that vibration level at that business. And so if they get to the point where they're getting close to some parameters, they say, hey, talk to the contractor and what do we need to do to alleviate this? So it's just one example of what they do.
Yeah, I witnessed blasting going down Iowa Avenue in Eitzen when their city sewer system went in. And the guy drilled and blasted right in the middle of the street. And it was precision, extreme precision. It was just a whoop. And no ground shaking or anything. It was just the ground heaved and he moved on. It was very precisely done that I've seen.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the CUP for Bonanza Grain.
Seconded.
A motion made by Judy, seconded by Steve, and I will ask for a roll call vote.
Discussion?
Any discussion?
I'm on the planning commission and I really struggled with this as I did at the beginning. And I didn't like the compromise they came up with having, I don't think it's the county's business to tell them to go and blast again. And, oh, we'll see if you damage your house.
Right.
And if we do damage their house, is the county going to be on the lawsuit for that? Like, say they wrecked a well or something. That's why I was the only one who voted against it, because of that. It's just, and some of the other points that were made earlier by the audience, but I've been on many commissions in my life, and this is the toughest one I've been on. And it's, you know, I've been yelled at and told all I do is ask questions. When I ask questions, people get angry, but I'm going to keep on asking questions. And like I said, I don't really think it's up. I wish that the company would come with say we made a mistake. We want to get in compliance because he said brought in compliance. They should have had a compromise. not our board of zoning telling them what to do. I guess I'm going to stick to my guns. I just want to make my point. It's rules are rules, and I want to be fair to everybody, like I said before. Yeah. If I go out on the highway and go 70 miles an hour, I expect to get pulled over. I don't expect to hear say, we're going to work with you. So, well, that's my point.
We agree. Roll call.
District 1?
District 1?
That's me, yes.
District 2?
No.
District 3?
Aye.
District 4? Yes. District 5?
No.
Now, with that being said, does the board feel any other?
We have a motion on the floor, Justin.
Oh, gosh, I-
Vote
oh.
and we need to approve the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's it approved?
3-2. Approved. With this on the table, or being approved, any other questions the board has or anything with this going through? You want to?
I guess I'd like
Restrictions or anything from the board side?
I want to be present, I guess, when the blast takes place. I'd like to be around somewhere. I want to see it happen.
Yeah, I think we need to be kept informed of everything
I just
in
want
the
to be
next
there.
6 months.
Somewhere around there.
They have to reapply for a new one after 6 months.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be terminated after 6 months. I guess I've been in discussion with a few of the planning and zoning members about upping some of the seismographs too, having a few more in the area versus what's already been there. One of which was on top of the hill. I know we were talking about the impact to the ground on that side of the hill, the backside, like at the Schrader's residence, at each possible area. Yeah, but a couple of those other ones are not in there that, I know talked about having more seismographs and more basically data to go by, which also I think would be a good thing going forward with the, yes, sir.
Are you requesting then that probably we do maybe up to, I know there's always been 2, do you want?
Well, it's already conditioned at 4.
Condition at 4.
4.
You done an additional then?
I would, yeah. And that would be just my request if everybody else would just, and obviously going forward with the fracking and stuff and whatever, it would be nice to have as much data as possible for different variations.
And maybe, well,
footage,
maybe
different
even
areas.
closer to the blast site itself.
Mm-hmm.
To find, to see how different is it from further out, just to get some kind of a reading.
You want to put a number on it? 5, 6, you thinking, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 6 or 8. I mean, just I think the more data, the better. And I'd hate to have it come back and somebody say, yeah, but you didn't have one here. I mean, just to cover all possible avenues on this deal. Just and it is, obviously in the light of all the fracking stuff, this comes up. Obviously, the spotlight's on this, but okay, fine, it's approved. Let's take the opportunity then to really find out what's going on, so we know in the future we can have this as a basis for going forward. So that would be just my request: is a lot more seismographs. The other thing is, as far as if all of a sudden data comes back that yes, this could have potentially done harm, is there anything as far as who's responsible for fixing that, or or how does that work?
Well, that would be the blasting company.
Okay, so they're on the hook
Their insurance.
to make it right to the landowners?
Yep, and it's up to the landowner to bring it to them and
Okay.
file that correct paperwork.
I mean, as far as seismograph readings in the county being witness to these, we've done it in the past. There's quarries down on the Crescent, I know Teresa, you probably remember that, that's been quite a few years ago, that actually every time they did blast, they had to have witnesses down there. So I mean, it's something we have done in the past also, so.
Last thing, this new territory, is that something that we should have surveyed, just to, not on the county's dime, since it's not our project, but the dime of the operator, just start having a practice of having it surveyed so we don't have issues like this come up in the future?
Yep, you can make that a condition as well. I would suggest that western and southern boundaries, where they're encroaching on that 1,000-foot, to have that line surveyed. I think that's a good idea.
That'd be, yeah, it would be good practice, I mean, for their own benefit, for their own good.
Could we put the cost of that on the mine owner?
That would be
Instead
the
of
cost.
Bobby?
Yeah,
Right,
nobody
that-
hours.
When they come in
You
to
said
do
it
the
would-
application.
At one point, Bobby said it costs a lot of money for the county to get it surveyed.
Well, if we were to go ahead and survey,
They'll pay,
prove they're not
they're gonna pay
required.
for this survey.
Yeah, yep, this would be a condition that you put on, and that would be their cost, just like the cost of extra seismographs would be theirs.
So they're paying.
Yep.
Should we make it a motion that 2 additional conditions that it be surveyed and double on the
I'd make a
Seismographs.
motion to have this,
To have 8?
well, 6 to 8. I mean, they're the ones putting it out, it's to their protection.
Well, I'd rather have more than less and have somebody come back and complain about it.
At
I
least a
don't know
couple more,
enough
yeah.
about
I guess I don't either, you
to
know,
put
but
a
I
number.
I agree with Justin, I think a few more
Yeah.
would not hurt,
Right.
just to cover
They already
things.
have readings to the north,
Mhm.
so maybe they can move some of them to the south, into the south, where the damage is being.
What's a seismograph cost?
Well, it goes to the company that
It's
put it out.
Yeah.
Approximately $200 per graph.
200 per seismograph?
To have it.
Okay, so
So
4
let's
more,
say
you're only
6.
talking $800.
Yeah.
But are you talking 4 more beyond the 2 that they had before?
No, they're gonna do 4 right now, so
Right,
instead
so
of
but
total of 4,
still
they
then you're tripling the cost, you're not doubling it. Because they were paying 200 and you want to add, or I mean, it's 200 per thing, so they were paying 400. And you want them to go up to
6 more.
6 more is, yeah, it's triple.
You think it's adequate?
Do I think 4
4 is adequate, or would more be better, is more better? I think through calculations, you can, actually, from last site to one seismograph, you can calculate, I guess, whatever vibrations there are.
Right, right. And distance is key. That's a big factor. It's just my opinion, but yes, I think it's adequate to have 4.
Mhm.
But it's up to you guys.
I think more data is better. You got an opportunity here that you're gonna
Or
do some
change it to
readings. and
6,
for-
let's
Yeah.
require 6 for, in the conditions.
I'd be okay with 6.
So surveying is 6.
And
Surveying
yeah,
in 6.
knowing where their boundaries are.
Mhm.
Okay, that's my motion.
Okay, motion's made by Teresa.
Second?
Seconded Steve. Any other discussion? Craig, you got a question?
Yeah, this survey, you are going to require them to survey the expanded lines or
The expanded.
It expanded.
Okay, not the ones that they supposedly went past.
Yeah, it'd just be the lines for the new permit that we're dealing with today. All right, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.